Hola, ¿qué tal, chicos? ¿Cómo están? Y bienvenidos a mi canal de Spanish World, where we learn, por supuesto, el español. That's right. I'm going to teach you guys Spanish, okay? You want to learn some Spanish? Quédense conmigo, because nobody is going to teach you el español tal y cual como yo lo enseño. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at something very special that I have for you today. Alacranes musical, por tu amor. All right. I want to show you guys a song in Spanish, and I'm going to teach you the grammar behind the lyrics of this song. Okay, so here's the first verse. Por otro amor he sufrido tanto. So right off the bat here, we have the question with por. What's the issue with por? Well, in Spanish, we have por versus para. You use por if it's out of motivo, and we use para if it's for your objective, el objetivo. We say por, in this case, it's por otro amor he sufrido tanto. So for another, what does amor mean? Oh yeah, baby, it's the L word, love. Por otro amor he sufrido tanto. So it's because of love, right? That's the motive. He sufrido. What does he sufrido mean? Well, we have a right here, and I'm going to explain that to you guys. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. First of all, we have the format. We have to remember this format. Yo means I, tú means you, él and ella are he and she, usted is you formal, nosotros, we, vosotros, you guys in Spain, ellos and ellas means they, ellas as if they're all females, and ustedes, you guys in Latin America, that's the one we generally use, right? Ustedes. And that lines up with the verb haber. So this is el perfecto de indicativo, the present perfect. It's like when you say I have, and then you use a past participle, done or something, or I have written, or I have gone. And so whatever the verb is, every verb in English as well as in Spanish has a past participle version of the verb. And so we have to know how to form past participles in Spanish. The verb sufrir is an IR verb, as we can see down here. Sufrir means to suffer, and it turns into sufrido because ER and IR verbs turn into ido at the end. In other words, you get rid of the ER or the IR ending and you replace it with ido. So sufrir turns into sufrido, suffered. I have suffered. We know that it's I have suffered because it says a. A lines up with yo. See how it's the upper left-hand corner? And it's the upper left-hand corner. So it's he sufrido, I have suffered. Tanto means so much. All right, so let's go ahead and write that in here. For another love, I have suffered so much. Okay, there we have it. Okay. Ahora que no estás aquí. So, ahora que. Sometimes the word que means what. In this case, you know it's not a question, so it doesn't mean what. What else does que mean? Well, it means that. So sometimes the word that can be used as a conjunction or as a relative pronoun. In this case, it's more of a conjunction. It's just connecting these two parts of the sentence together. Actually, ahora que is more of a transition term. It means now that. All right, so we have now that. Ahora que no estás aquí. No estás aquí. So this is the verb estar. Estar means to be. Ahora que no estás aquí means now that you are not here. Why does it mean you are not here? And the reason why is because estar, if you go down here and we put in the little green lines, Estás is the middle one on the left. And the middle one on the left lines up with tú, which means you. Ahora que no estás means now that you aren't here. It's aren't here because it's no, and that's how we negate it. In English, we say are not or aren't. But in Spanish, we simply put the word no in front of it. And then aquí means here. Este amor no ha terminado. Okay. So este means this. And I actually wanted to explain this. These are called demonstratives because they demonstrate something. So este means this. This can also be plural, and it can also be feminine. Esta or estas, like estas rosas, if I had like more than one rose, I would say these roses in English. I would say estas rosas. Remember, in Spanish, most of the time it rhymes, and it has to match in gender and number with the thing that it describes. But there is a difference with este because there is no este in the plural form. You're going to say estos. There is an esto in the singular form, but that's going to be for something general, like esto es lo que te digo. This is what I'm saying. But anyway, in this case, we're talking about something specific. Este amor, right here. Este amor, this love, right? So we say this love. No ha terminado. So now this love becomes the subject. And so when we're talking about subjects, the subject is the thing that does the verb. The verb is haber. This is another perfecto de indicativo, the present perfect. And so that's going to be the verb have, to have, followed by another verb in its past participle form. In this case, terminar, which means to end. And so it means this love hasn't ended. This love hasn't ended because we have right here, terminar is an AR verb. And so the AR goes to ado, and that means to end. And it's because love is not he, it's not she, and it's not usted. It would be an it type of thing. That's why in English, when I refer to it, you know that I'm talking about it. And it is este amor, this love. And so we replace it with the word it in English as a subject pronoun in the singular third person. And that would be it. But in Spanish, obviously, we don't say it. We just conjugate the verb to the third person singular, and it's in this case. H is silent in Spanish. This love hasn't ended. No ha terminado. Aún pienso en ti. So aún pienso en ti. Aún just means still. So we say still. And then pienso is I think. En ti. En a lot of times is in or on. But in this case, it's the preposition that goes with pienso, which means I think. And the preposition in English is not in or on. It would be about. About. Ti means you. And I'll explain why. And of course, in English, we would probably put the I before still, right? I still think about you. So here's the verb pensar. I want you to notice that it is a boot verb. Why is it a boot verb? Because the E turns into an IE for this conjugation, this one, and this one. So it's pienso, piensas, piensa, and piensan. The reason why they're called boot verbs, stem changing boot verbs, is because if you draw a line around the conjugations that have the stem changer in it, it looks like a boot. And so they call them boot verbs. Notice that the infinitive form of the verb, meaning the unconjugated, pensar, is the same as the nosotros and the vosotros form. Pensar, pensamos, pensáis. All right. Ti. a lot of times emphatic pronouns are used in intransitive statements. This is not necessarily an intransitive statement, but this is an emphatic. It's emphasizing to whom is being thought about, or about whom, I should say. I am is being thought of. So we say aún pienso en ti, means I still think about you. The T is the middle one on the left, and so that's tú, which means you. A lot of times it'll be like para ti or a ti if it's an intransitive statement, but in this case you have to say en ti because it's the verb pensar, which is usually used with the preposition en. Just like in English, the verb to think is usually used with the preposition about. All right, let's go to the next verse. We have por otro amor. Let me erase some of these. Por otro amor, yo iré vagando. Okay. Por otro amor, yo iré. I want to point something out about ir. The verb ir is an irregular verb in the present tense. Yo ir would be yo voy. But in this case, this is the future tense. And so I have the future tense endings over here. To use the future tense, you have to include the entirety of the infinitive form of the verb. And so we're not going to get rid of the IR ending or the ER ending or the AR ending. We have to include the entire infinitive form of the verb and then put one of these endings in accordance with the subject doing the verb. So we can analyze this and see that it says iré. Iré has the E right here, and it has the entire infinitive form of the verb, which the verb ir is a very short verb, and that's why it's irregular in the present tense. But that E is right here. So it's the yo form. It means, so ir means to go, as it says right here. Iré means I will go. And so that's what this says. Por otro amor, yo iré. For another love, I will go. Vagando. What does vagar mean? Well, by the way, this ando part is a gerund. So gerunds are explained right here. Gerunds are the ing in English. So go in or walking or talking. Those are gerunds. In Spanish, you form gerunds in the following way. If it's an AR verb, you replace the AR ending with ondo. Or if it's an ER or an IR verb, you replace the ER or the IR ending with yendo, sometimes spelled with an IE, sometimes spelled with a Y. Normally it's spelled with a Y if there's two vowels, like leer, to read, would be leyendo with a Y to separate the vowels. But either way, it has that same sound to it, yendo or yendo. Vagar means to wander. Vagando means wander in. Por otro amor yo iré vagando. So what does it mean? For another love, because otro means another or other. Yo iré vagando. I will go wandering. And then it says, tras mi soledad. So tras is a directional term. I've written out some of the most common directional terms in Spanish, of which tras is one of them. So tras is right here. It's similar to detrás de, which is often used with the preposition de, meaning behind. But in this case, there is no preposition. It just says tras mi soledad, and it means behind or after. Soledad is loneliness. Mi soledad would, so mi right here is actually a possessive. Mi soledad means my loneliness. So for another love, I will go wandering. after my loneliness. Pobrecito. Poor guy, right? Así es el amor, amigos. Pero no hay que llorar. Tan solo por el mal deletreo de Mai. Ahí está. Ya lo arreglé. Okay, after my loneliness. Now, the future tense can be used to show commitment. He says, no descansaré. So what does descansar mean? And what tense is this in? And what is the subject? Well, it's in the future tense. You can tell it's in the future tense because it has the full infinitive form of the verb, descansar, which is right here. Descansar means to rest. And then it has this E once again. And so that's this upper left-hand corner, which goes hand in hand with yo. And so we have descansaré, I will rest. But in this case, it says no descansaré, which means I will not rest. See how it shows commitment to something? No descansaré, I will not rest. I will not rest. Hasta tenerte otra vez. Okay, so hasta means until. Tener means to have, but it's not the other to have that's used with past participles to form the present perfect. El perfecto de indicativo. This is tener as like to have a thing. In this case, the thing is you. Te, as we can see right here with direct object pronouns, which are used, by the way, with transitive verbs. A transitive verb is a verb that requires an object, such as to have. It sounds incomplete without some kind of an object to go with it. And that's why they call it a transitive verb that requires an object. And so these are the direct object pronouns in Spanish. If it's a person or a thing, it can be any one of these. Typically, if it's a thing, well, a thing is the third person. It could also be things, right? In which case they have to match in number and gender with the things that they are representing. So if it's like un libro, which is a book, it would be lo. It could also be a man in the third person, which would be lo, or a woman, which would be la, or a rose, which would be la, or roses, which would be las, or books, which would be los, right? And so it just has to match whatever it's whatever it's describing. But if it's the first person or the second person, singular or plural, then it's going to be one of these, right? It's going to be, or it could even be los, like ustedes would be los. Es bueno tenerlos. But it says te. And so te is right here, is the middle one on the left, which is tu, meaning you, to have you, tenerte. Hasta means until, tenerte, to have you, otra vez, literally means another time. But in English, we would say again, okay? Otra vez means again. So let's type that in. Until, and even though it says to have you, in English, you would say I have you. In Spanish, you don't have to because the subject is already identified in the previous line. No descansaré means I will not rest. And so since the subject is already identified in Spanish, you can leave it in the infinitive form right here, tenerte, hasta tenerte. But in English, you would use the subject again. In English, you almost always include the subject pronoun, almost always, unless it's like a command or something. There are some instances where you leave it out in English. But as an English speaker, you have a pretty good feel for that, I imagine. Until I have you again. Y si ustedes no son angloparlantes, si el inglés no es su primer idioma, por supuesto también puedo enseñar inglés. Así que contáctenme, yo les ayudo. Okay, so until I have you again. That's it for this one. So let's go to the next verse and let's erase some of this stuff. Okay. Y si tú aún me quieres, y si tú aún me quieres, ya sabes dónde estoy. So y means and. Si does not mean yes in this case. And I'll show you how to differentiate between si and si. So si means if, and si with an accent mark above the I means yes. You can remember that because it looks like the accent mark looks like it's nodding its head yes. But even if you can't remember that for some reason, you can always tell by the context. There's really no way to mix this up. Y si tú aún me quieres means and if you, we know that aún means still, and then me quieres. So here's the issue with querer. Let's talk about this verb, quieres. It's the verb querer. It's a boot verb, right? So this E turns into an IE right here, right here, right here, and right here. And if you outline them, it looks like a boot. So it's called a stem changing boot verb. Sometimes they just call them stem changers, but a lot of times they're called boot verbs because it looks like a boot. So here's the thing. It means to want, right? But in Spanish, it's actually a common way to say to love. If you're talking about a person, te quiero means I love you. You can also say te amo, right? Amar means to love. El amor means love as a noun. El amor, right? And a lot of times people just, even English speakers, know what that means for some reason. Amor. But amar is the verb to love, and querer technically means to want, but it also means to love when you use it with people. Te quiero, papi means I love you, daddy. Te quiero, mommy, right? And you can also say it like to somebody, anyone who you love, right? Te quiero, mi amor. And so, querer really means to love in this case. Now, let's talk about me, right? Me, we already know what me means. I talked about it on the previous slide with the direct object pronouns. Amar, who do you love? It requires a person to love somebody. So it's a transitive verb. It needs a direct object pronoun. And me refers to yo, me, right? Me. And it's pretty easy to think of that because it's spelled the same way. Me, it's pronounced me in Spanish, but it's me, right? And if you still love me. And by the way, these pronouns, they go before the conjugated verb. In English, they always go after the verb, right? But in Spanish, if it's a conjugated verb, the pronoun, whatever, direct object pronoun, indirect object pronoun, or a reflexive pronoun, they always go before the conjugated verb. So let's go ahead and type this one in. Y si tú aún me quieres. And if you still love me, oh boy, where are we going here? Where are we going with this? Ya sabes dónde estoy. So now we have the verb saber. What does saber mean? Well, it's right here. It's just, it's technically an irregular verb because I have the regular verb endings written over here. So typically, any AR verb in Spanish is going to have these endings. And any ER verb will have these endings, and any IR verb will have these endings, right? But you can see the yo form in every single one of these is the same. It ends in an O, O, O. But why does saber not end in an O for the yo form? Because it is an irregular verb. There's about 20 or so irregular verbs in Spanish in the present tense that you just want to memorize. And once you remember those 20 verbs, more or less 20 of them, it's easy to figure out what other ones could possibly be irregular. A lot of times it's just like a prefix or something that is moved around to form another verb. But anyway, saber is irregular, so the yo form is se, but that's not the form that we're talking about. We're talking about this one. It's sabes. And so we know it's the to form because it's the middle one on the left-hand side, which corresponds with these guys over here. These lines don't match up with the previous one, but it's the to on the middle, right? And so, donde estoy? Now let's talk about estoy. What is estoy? Well, that's the verb estar, which is also irregular because look, it's estoy, not just an O, it has a Y. Plus, it also has these accent marks in the conjugations. Estás, está, están, está. Well, estáis, that is normal to have an accent mark there. But anyway, we know that estoy is the yo form, right? It corresponds with yo. So that means I am. Remember, to be is a verb, but we have conjugations in English as well. So estoy means I am, because you don't say I be in English, you say I am. You can say I be and people will probably understand you, but the correct way would be I am. And estás would be you be, or in other words, you are, right? And está would be he be or she be, or in other words, he is or she is. And then estamos, we are, and then you guys are, and then they are, right? And so there are conjugations in English as well, in case you didn't know. Most verbs don't have very many conjugations. It's typically just the third person singular that has an S at the end, and that's the extent of it. But there are some verbs like to be that have quite a few different conjugations in English. Anyway, ya sabes donde estoy means, well, ya means now or already. And so you say, you already know where I'm at, right? Donde estoy, you already know where I am. So ya means already, sabes. So you already know. Ya sabes means you already know. Donde means where. Estoy means I am. Ya sabes donde estoy. You know where I'm at. You already know where I am. Aquí estaré. Ah, look, that's the future tense. Estar now has the entire infinitive form of the verb, and then it is completed with this future tense in the yo form. So that's why I have these future tense endings right here. And so the right here, here's estar, which means to be. Estaré means I will be. Now we have esperándote. So remember, the andos are the gerunds, the ings, right? And esperar, esperando, is the verb esperar, which means to wait. In some contexts, it can also mean to hope or to expect. But esperando means waiting. And so esperando, waiting. In Spanish, if the verb is in the ing form, the gerund form, the ando or the yendo form, esperando, you can add the extra pronoun to the end of the verb. You can connect it. Remember how earlier I said, when I said me quieres, I said that the direct object pronoun always goes before the conjugated verb, which is true unless it's in the gerund form. If it's in the gerund form, then it can actually be attached to the end. Okay, just like that. Aquí estaré esperándote. And so that's one of the rules in Spanish. You can attach it to the end of a gerund. You can also attach it to the end of a positive command or to the end of the infinitive form. Con todo el corazón. But anyway, let's type this one in. So aquí, I will, so here means, aquí means here, and then estaré, I will be. Esperándote means waiting for you, because in English, waiting is always used with the preposition for. In Spanish, no preposition is needed. You can just add that pronoun to the end, and that's it. But in English, you have to say for. Here, I will be waiting for you. And then he says, con todo el corazón. Con todo el corazón. So con means with, todo means all, el corazón means the heart. Because in Spanish, when you're referring to your own body parts or the body parts of somebody, you use the article of the body part, because body parts are nouns and every noun has an article associated with it. Corazón is associated with the article el corazón. In English, you would use a possessive. You would say my heart. In Spanish, you don't use a possessive for your body parts. You use the article. But since we're translating it to English, we're going to use a possessive with all my heart. One more thing to mention on this slide. The reason why there's an accent mark on esperando te is because this is what you call an esdrújula in Spanish. In Spanish, you count the syllables in phonetics from the end of the word. And so this is the third to last syllable. In Spanish, by default, the emphasis in the pronunciation is always on the second to last syllable of any word, even if it's a two-syllable word, like sabes, for example. And so you don't need an accent mark to indicate where the emphasis in the pronunciation is, because the rule is that by default, it's on the second to last syllable. Sabes. It's not sabes. It's sabes. Sabe. And look, even for the nosotros form, sabemos. It's the second to last syllable. And so you don't need an accent mark. But if there's something contrary to that, like sabéis, then you have to have an accent mark. And so if there's an accent mark, then that is where the emphasis in the pronunciation goes. That's the rule. The accent mark takes precedence over anything else. If there's an accent mark, that is definitely where the emphasis in the pronunciation goes, no matter what. If there is no accent mark, then the emphasis automatically goes to the second to last syllable, unless the word ends in a consonant other than NRS. And this is where people get confused, because they're like, well, why is it NRS? And that's exactly what I want to explain right now. And I'm going to change the color of my pencil to do that. So let's use blue. Look at these conjugations over here. They all end in vowels, right? Almost all of them end in vowels. The only other thing that they end in is S and N, right? And that's the case. And that's why it's S and N, because the rule wouldn't work unless S and N were exempt. That's the only reason it works. Otherwise, the pronunciation of all the words in Spanish would just be like completely different. If S and N weren't exempt, then you would say quieres and quieren and queremos. And so that's why they have to be exempt in order for the conjugations to preserve the original sound of the verb, okay? Or the sound of the conjugations that they make. And there are other ways to speak Spanish, not just these regular conjugations. You know, there's like vos and all that. And I, had like a little discussion with my phonetics teacher about this, and he didn't agree with me because he was from Argentina and he uses vos. Well, that's fine, but vos, it requires an accent mark. So, that's kind of beside the point anyway. But anyway, that's the reason why. That's it, guys. Don't forget who taught it to you, all right? The accent mark rule explained by Spanish World. Jonathan, ¿no? Yo les explico, se lo explico todo. All right. Let's go to the next, the last verse here. Erase, all right. Así que ven y dime cuánto me amas. So we're getting into, so this is a transition term. Así que is a transition term. It means so, okay? So, así que, so. We say so, así que means so. Ven. Ven is an irregular to command. They're all written out right here. Ven means come. Y dime. Di is an irregular to command. So y means and. Ven y dime. Come and tell me. Cuánto is an interrogative. Cuánto means how much. Like cuánto cuesta este cigarro, right? How much does this cigar cost? ¿Cuánto cuesta esta cerveza? How much does this beer cost? Right? Or ¿cuánto cuesta esta paleta? How much does this sucker cost? But in this case, it says, así que ven y dime cuánto me amas. How much you love me. Así que come and tell me how much you love me. All right, so let's take a look at this. The irregular two commands. Ven comes from the verb venir. Go back to green. All right, venir. Venir in the to command, it's a positive to command, is ven, come. Ven aquí means come here. Sometimes you hear parents scolding their children in Spanish, ven aquí, or ven acá. Acá also means here. It's like, come right here, ven acá, right? Or you have this other one, di. Di comes from the verb decir. For whatever reason, it's di. You just have to remember these. So I would write all these down and memorize them. Se, pon, ten, sal, ven, ve, di, haz esto. Do this. But anyway, di. Now it has di me. Di me. It doesn't say dime, guys. It says di. That's a positive to command, meaning tell. Tell what? Tell me. Tell me. Di me. Remember how I said that the pronouns can be attached to the end for 3 reasons. What are the 3 reasons that a pronoun can be attached to the end of the verb? 1, if the verb is left in the infinitive form, like decir me. Or 2, if the verb is in the gerund form, like diciendo me. Or if it's a positive command, like di me. So those are the 3 reasons. Infinitive form, gerunds, and positive commands. Dime cuánto me amas, dime cuánto me extrañas. So this whole sentence right here is basically the same structure as the one above it. So come and tell me how much you blank me. What does extrañar mean? Extrañar means to miss. How much you miss me. Así que ven y dime cuánto me amas. Así que ven, dime cuánto me extrañas. Come and tell me how much you miss me. Okay, and then it says, por tu amor. Por is for, right? For your love. Por tu amor. For your love. Yo viajaría hasta el infinito. So let's talk about viajar. This verb right here isn't the future tense. It does have the full infinitive form of the verb. And so there's only 2 verb tenses that do this. It's the future tense, el indicativo del futuro, and the conditional tense, which I have written down right here, el potencial simple. So el potencial simple has the ias. In English, it's would, okay? Would, but it's not the... Here's the thing with would, and this confuses people because in English, we also use would for the past tense. We say, I would, go to bed early. When I was a kid, I would do this. When I was a kid, I would do that. But that's not the would that we're talking about. We're talking about the hypothetical would, which makes it sound like you would do something possibly in the future, not in the past. Okay, like hypothetically speaking, like if I were you, I would do this, right? And that would be the conditional tense, the el potencial simple. Viajar, it says what viajar means. So let's take a look at this. Viajar means to travel. Sometimes you learn about this when you're learning about like tourist vocabulary in Spanish when you take a Spanish class. You learn how to be a tourist. Viajar is one of those basic first verbs that you learn. It means to travel. Viajaría means I would travel. Okay. And so it says, por tu amor, yo viajaría for your love, I would travel. Hasta means until, but in this case, it's talking about from one location to another. In English, you would say to. To, I would travel to el infinito means infinity. Infinity. For your love, I would travel to infinity. And then te cantaré. Remember what tense that is? Is it the conditional? No, it's the future tense. We've seen this a few times in the song already, right? Te cantaré. The te refers to you. In English, we have to put the verb first. And so cantar means to sing, right? But we know that it's I will sing because it's the future yo form of the verb. So we say, I will sing you, because you has to come after the verb in English. It goes before the verb in Spanish, unless for those three reasons that I mentioned before, if it's the infinitive form, or if it's a gerund, or if it's a positive command. Those are the three reasons that it can come afterwards. But if it's not, then it'll go before. So I will sing you canciones. A canción is a song. Canciones means songs. It's plural. That is a relative pronoun. Que means that in this case. You know that it means that because it's not a question. If it's a question, then it means what? If it's not a question, then it means that. Okay. I will sing you songs that para ti. Now this is para. So if it's the objective, right? If it's for you, if I have done something, like for example, if I'm giving you a gift, it's going to you. It's para ti, para ti. In this case, it says, I will sing you songs that for you, yo he escrito. Remember the verb haber means to have, used with past participles. So it's the el indicativo, el perfecto de indicativo, the present perfect. And so you have, I will sing you songs that for you, I have. What does escrito mean? It's right here. Escribir means to write. Escrito is the past participle of to write. In English, written. And the reason why I wrote this whole entire list here is because not all verbs can be turned into their past participle form in Spanish by simply replacing the AR with ado and the ER and the IR with ido. There is a list of verbs, and I put it right here, that are irregular, and you just have to remember their past participle form. And there's a bunch of them in English too. Not all English verbs have equal past participle forms. It's just something you have to get familiar with. And so I took the liberty of writing them all down. Let me see if I can move my, hold on, see if I can move my thing here over here somewhere. So now you guys can pause it and write all those down if you want. So abrir means to open. Abierto, it's not, for example, it's not abrido. You would never say that. It's abierto. So you just have to remember these. Abierto, cubierto, dicho, descubierto, deshecho, devuelto, escrito, etc. So there they are. All right, yeah, and it looks like we're done. I did mention these cuanto, cuanta, right? And so those are interrogatives. These are other interrogatives. Interrogatives are just question words, right? So there they are. So leave down in the comments if you want to hear me play the song. I can't do it with the program that I have right now, because this program that I'm using right now, it's good at picking up voice, but it's not good at picking up guitar. It'll start like omitting the sounds of the guitar and it won't sound good. So I'll have to play the song in a different video using different video software than what I'm using right here. So let me know if you want me to do that, and I might post that as well. Anyway, hopefully you learned something from the grammar, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Hasta luego.